Obviously, you know how it is. Like, it's your first real job, and you have to get to know the office and the people and the project and so on and so forth. I was kind of fortunate due to this kind of BIM thing to get into Kistefos, which is this kind of twisting bridge / museum in Norway, which I think is one of the most beautiful projects Big has ever done.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Creative Insider Podcast. In this podcast episode, my guest was Martino Hutz, German architect and former design lead at Björkingers Group. He's now based in Munich, where he started his own practice, Martino Hutz Architects. It's going to be a very interesting podcast. We talk about his education, how he joined Big, what he learned there, what he could take from there and transmit it into his own practice now in Munich. What are the challenges? What projects did he work on? What projects he working on? So it's going to be very interesting. But before we start, I want to thank you for tuning into this episode. And before we start, to remind you a few ways to support the podcast. The simplest one, the one for free. You can just like the episode, subscribe to the channel, drop a comment below, say if you like the episode, say who you would like us to interview, what you would like to see more on the podcast. The second part, if you like the podcast a lot, you can subscribe to our Real Insiders on Patreon, link below, or join any of the tiers of YouTube, interns, seniors, and partners. You can go and check it out and get some perks. If you just like it for one time and you want to just be nice to us, you can use the Super Thanks button where you can donate a little bit of money for the production and existence of this podcast. Thank you very much for supporting the podcast however you like, and now enjoy the conversation with Martino Hutz. Hello, Martino. Welcome to the Creative Insider Podcast. We finally managed to do it.
Yes. Hi, Georgi. Happy to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation.
You are one of the first guests that I first met in real life, and then I meet on the podcast.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. We had a nice meeting in Frankfurt.
Yeah, you texted me and we met. We had a nice pinza. I was super happy that there are people that actually connect, and it was super interesting to hear your story. So let's share it with everyone, because I will introduce you briefly. You were a design lead at the Björkingers Group in Copenhagen, and then you left the company a couple of years ago, and now you started your own practice. Is that right?
Yes, that sounds good.
How you have a very interesting background. When we met, you told me a little bit about it. But I didn't ask you, how did you decide to become an architect at all? Is somebody in your family an architect, or how did you come up with this idea?
No, actually, it's, I don't know, I guess it's a little bit like step by step. I've always been a fan of sketching and drawing for my whole life. Maybe that's something which I got from my grandma. So I was sitting with her, like, sketching all over again. And actually, I just moved 2 months ago into a new apartment, and my mom gave me all these boxes of different sketches which were piling up in her basement. And she was like, "No, please, now take them." Anyway, so this was I still like drawing and sketching. This was definitely one side, but then the other, I also was quite technical in a sense. So I don't know, I was fixing my bike when I was 6 years old or stuff like that. So I kind of started really early to get into the technical side of things, or demounted stuff and stuff like this. So yeah, and I guess then first I wanted to become inventor, then movie maker, and then I started this various internships, and then I just started to study.
Where did you study? You're now based in Munich. Are you originally from there, or where? Because you're German, but I don't know. I didn't ask you from which city are you actually from.
Yes. Yeah, actually I was born in Italy, but then my family moved to Munich when I was basically a year old. So I would say I'm from Munich, nevertheless. But then I kind of Well, I mean, before I started studying, I did 1 year of internships. I was just starting already in high school, working at a local architecture office here in Munich, which was quite nice. I'm still in good contact with them. And then I kind of got interested in it. Then after I finished high school, I wanted to leave as early as I could. And then I ended up being in Bangkok and started an internship as an architect or an architecture office. So this was also kind of like a nice experience, and then which I can also recommend to everybody who starts architecture school. Do your interns if possible even before, so you kind of get an idea how an office life would look like. And then it was almost like a year of internships in Munich and Bangkok. And then I left to Hamburg to do my bachelor's. And then after 3 years, 3 years in Hamburg, I went 1 year to Paris. And from Paris, I applied to Angewandte, to Studio Zaha Hadid, where I then did my master's. And I graduated in 2016, then already with Katsuyo Sejima. So this was kind of the short version.
So you started working, you went also to Bangkok before even studying architecture?
Yes.
Oh, that sounds cool. How did you manage to be accepted? Like when you told them you just are passionate for architecture, but not really an architect yet, how were you accepted?
Yeah, actually in Germany, it's more common to do this kind of internships in your high school time. So you kind of maybe just for 1 or 2 months or so. So I wasn't expecting that it would be so bad or so hard to get into offices, because worldwide, I would say you usually take people when they're in the second year or so, like as a minimum to have some basis. But I was already kind of nerdy with software, so I knew Photoshop and Illustrator back in the times. I like to work with Flash and stuff like this. So I had like a basic knowledge of graphics, mainly graphics. I know ArchiCAD already through my internship here in Munich. And nevertheless, I guess I wrote like, let's say 50, 60 applications, and I only got like one crazy Australian who accepted me. And then he said, yeah, come by. And he had this small studio. And then I was just, yeah, hello, this is my portfolio. And he's fine, sit down. There's some graphics for some interior project. I will be back in 4 hours and start working. And this kind of what I did for half a year.
Sounds great. I'm curious, because you had a very like global development as an architect. What was your motivation for architecture? Because also like to get accepted in Vienna to study with Zaha Hadid, as you said, it's probably a hard test to get admitted. Once you finish your bachelor, what was your understanding for architecture? What made you passionate about it? What made you love it?
It's maybe two questions, because first of all, I always thought wherever you go to work or study is part of your education. So for me, it was always clear, first of all, I don't want to stay in my hometown just for the sake of breathing some fresh air and getting to know new cultures and architecture and way of thinking. So this is something I almost took for granted no matter what. That what brought me to Hamburg, which is basically almost the furthest north you could go out of German standards. And then it was, even before, you know how it is. Before university, you just get a sense of what it could be. And then I was just from when I went to Hamburg, from day one, I kind of swallowed everything I could get, basically each and every lecture and architecture books and libraries and talking to people and stuff like this. So just became more and more, let's say, I was diving into this world more and more.
And of course, like it's super nice to travel and to have these experiences. But if it's not too personal, if I may ask, how did you manage to afford? Because also staying in cities like, I mean, I don't know, Bangkok probably is not so expensive, but Paris, Hamburg, they're still quite pricey cities. Did you work also while studying, or did you have support from your family? How did you manage to afford that?
Yeah, a bit of both. So there is, I mean, Bangkok, I was constantly in minus for sure. But it was also relatively cheap. And I had friends there where I could crash their couch for a couple of weeks. And then I found like a tiny apartment. I got little payment already from the office where I was working. So I kind of managed. Then Paris, you get the Erasmus fundings and a little bit support of my family. And then, of course, I was always working on the side. So a little bit of both. But looking back, you're surprised how little you need to survive.
And also how little you're happy with. Because I noticed that when I was a student, like I had a 9 square meter room. My first room here in Frankfurt was 9 square meters just with a bed, a sink, and we had like a shared toilet and a shared showers. And I was super excited to be there.
Finally have your own. Yeah, absolutely. I also had the worst apartment I ever lived in Paris. So I was sharing it with a friend, and then you entered. There was like a tiny kitchen the size of a table. Then it was his room. Then there was my room, and then there was the bathroom. So whenever he went to the loo, he had to cross my room and vice versa. So we became very close friends.
I lived in a student dorm tower, and it was like, as I said, everything was shared, the kitchen. And also what was super interesting is that like there were the female and the male bathrooms and showers, but of course you had to go like to the shower with maybe your towel or something. So it was really exciting for a young person to sometimes see like girls walking around in towel. You're like, where did I land? But I don't know, but I like it.
Could be worse.
Could be worse. Could be worse. I like this whole sharing spaces thing here.
Based on good architecture planning, I guess.
Yes. It was my first experience in Germany. And one thing that I noticed also when I moved here, of course, I partied a little bit, but I was very focused to study because I came to Germany because I knew that there were better opportunities for me as like for my career. And the approach to architecture between Italy and Germany is different. I like to think that the Mediterranean area has a certain approach and the Nordic and German area has a different one. France is something, I think, on its own because it's neither Mediterranean, neither Nordic. What is your observation? Because you've studied in Germany, you've been to France, and then you've been in Austria. What is your observation on what is the difference? And then you've been to Denmark, of course, but then professionally, what is your observation about the differences? What were your takes from this experience on the approach of architecture in the different countries?
Good question. I agree. It's definitely different from country to country. And it's kind of true that the prejudices also are a little bit self-fulfilling. So like what you would describe as, let's say, the rational German kind of way of teaching was kind of true. Like even though the university in Hamburg wasn't super technical, it was rather like a good base education to get a good overall sense. And then when I went to Paris, I mean, I love the city. I also enjoyed the time at the university, but it was very much kind of, there was a teacher telling you what to do for next week, kind of almost writing you homework. And the approach was also way more, I guess, in some ways more artistic. but also less flexible in a sense that the professors were, these kind of people with their opinion, with their style, and then as a student you kind of followed them all the way through. And then, of course, Vienna Angewandte was a little bit like a special case because Angewandte was this international context. This could have been, I guess, anywhere in the world, being with Zaha and the international fellow students. So that was a bit of a special case, I would say.
What did you learn there? What was like, there is in every architect's mind, there is this mythology of archistars, and you've managed to work with a couple of them. What was, for example, your experience with Zaha Hadid?
It was, first of all, it's a 3 years master program, it still is now under different professorship. So the first 2 weeks are studios, and then you get mixed up with older students in higher semesters. And the overall studio was around 30 people. So I was very lucky to be accepted. Maybe also to add, I would say I was only accepted because, first of all, I was in Paris before. So I had, let's say my English was slightly better. I had some international background by being in Paris. And then when I was in Hamburg, the moment I heard somebody told me, like, yeah, by the way, there's a small Zaha office in Hamburg. I was like, what? And back then I was like the biggest fan. And then I applied and applied and applied. So I would say this was almost like the starting point for what came later. Because up until that point, I was just like a random student. I was after that as well. But then eventually I was able to work there for half a year or so, helping for some competitions. But I was really trying hard to get into Zaha office in Hamburg. And then that worked. And this also then, I would say, brought me into the studio. And then the environment at the Angewandte, so you started with older colleagues, which already put you in the mood. So it was completely different. The first thing I had to do, buying a new computer to get kind of some render power and computational power, and then you just keep going. And in the morning you had normal courses, let's say art history or technical stuff. And then in the afternoon or after lunch, there was studio time. And then it was just completely normal to work from first course starting at 9 up until evening 9 o'clock as well. And then most of the time you really spend there with your team, working on your studio project.
How were the teachers? Because, for example, I've had on the podcast Chris Bosse, who had studied under Peter Zumthor, and he told me this super funny story that they would work the whole night to manage to prepare all the layouts and everything for the presentation. And then Peter Zumthor shows up and, for example, he sits with his cigar, close his eyes, and says like, you want this room dark, but how dark? Have you thought about how you want it to be? What was from that not so hands-on, like despite all the computational design softwares and things like that, what was like the soft approach, like the software approach, like the idea, how to create architecture, what is the design philosophy, what was taught?
Yeah. This is what I really loved about it, because at that point when I started Angewandte, I already studied for 4 years architecture, and I kind of felt I have a good idea of what architecture could be. And then when I started, I really, really felt like I have zero learned about architecture. I literally started from scratch. And back to your question, what I loved about is they were really asking what's the essence of architecture. Let's say what I learned before was, let's build a building, let's build a school, and then you would say, I take the wall for granted. The wall could be out of bricks or out of wood or something, but it's a wall, with cladding, with plasterboard, whatever. And being at Zaha Studio was more like, what is a wall? So we were, for example, 2 semesters exploring with Caramba, it's a plugin for Grasshopper, how structural systems could work, which questions the essence of architecture being a wall. And even though some people would say, oh, that's all Zaha style, actually, if you would copy something which looked familiar just out of laziness, it was a complete no-go. So the whole idea was to really find like the something new, to explore, to find new shapes, new logics, new systems, new designs. And that was crazy. And it was super talented people, and of course everybody was respecting Zaha as much as possible, or as you can think of. Back then, she just won the Olympic stadium in Tokyo, and she was named as most important 100 people by Times Magazine and stuff like this. So she was really on her peak at that point. And then when there were, also stories, what you just said with Zumthor, there were stories like whenever we were working like crazy, then there was the moment when she entered the building and the whole floor was buzzing with people. You had students and moving models, and then suddenly it got quiet out of the blue. We were like just moving stuff or like hanging boards, and then it's like, okay, it's getting quiet now. And then the whole floor became dead silent, and then there was like an assistant running. There was a second kind of assistant running, her personal assistant running, and then she kind of came as this kind of light figure into the space. And she was pretty harsh, I have to say, but also really fair. She didn't care who presented, or she didn't care anything except the project quality. And either she liked it or not. If she liked it, she didn't say anything. If she hated it, she would let you know. So really exciting. Or when she was there were times when she was too busy to fly to Vienna, where she would just fly in all the students, and then we were sleeping on some Airbnbs, all paid by her, and flights paid, and then we were presenting in the studio. It was it was beautiful times.
What was so you said she was harsh, but what was then the wall alternatives you figured out? That was super interesting. Can you share like what were then after researching this topic, of what were some of the conclusions you came up with in the class?
You mean me personally after?
No, whoever, what was like, because you said they like the it's a little bit like first principles, right? Like Elon Musk designs his rockets, he goes back and says, what is a rocket and what do we need to make it? And then he starts from scratch, and that's what you try to do with architecture. Like there are walls, but if there are no walls, what else could it be? So what were some interesting alternatives that you personally come up with, or that you saw people coming up with? Because out of the spot, it's hard to imagine like what could it be.
You mean like this specific case of what the wall could be?
Yeah, like because you mentioned that one, and it was an interesting question.
Okay, like very specifically in case of this wall example was like we were analyzing force flows on slabs, and we were connecting let's say each floor has some wall partitions. Let's say there is a wet room which should be closed, but there is a living room which should be more open. And we were basically connecting the first force flow within the slab to the usage below. Meaning, let's say where you would have a lot of columns or a lot of wall elements because the bathroom would be inside. The slab could be way lower or thinner because you have less weight, or the weight is better distributed among a lot of, let's say, wall elements. And whereas you have bigger spans and little columns because the program could require it or would require it, the thickness of your slab would increase and the spans would increase. And just like I mean, like today there's beautiful references where this kind of moved on quite a bit, like Block Research Group or the guys from Stuttgart, Achim Menges and stuff. This is all stuff which kind of goes on for quite some time. Like these were, for example, this was this wall reference.
And is it the university in Vienna, the School of Applied Arts, private school, or is it a public one? How does it work? Because I'm not so familiar.
It's a public one.
So it's just very hard to get admitted. Are the tuitions very high because these super archi stars are teaching there, or is it just a matter of like super hard to get in?
No, absolutely not. I mean, it was 18 euro per semester, I believe, for your train ticket or something like that.
American people would get crazy when they hear this.
I know. No, I mean, that's the beauty of Austria. It's a very social country with a lot of public benefits.
Yeah, but Germany is good too. I mean, in Germany, it's not much more expensive.
No, university is basically for free as well. That's true.
I think this is one of the greatest things we have in Europe because it gives opportunity to more people to, improve their, so to say, social class. Because if you are able to get an education for a lower cost, even if you don't come from a rich family, you can go up by if you have talent. And so you studied there 3 years. What happened afterwards? Where did you go? Did you go directly to Big, or did you start first somewhere else?
Actually, I graduated, I think, in February, and then I was probably a month later, or two, I was lucky enough to get a teaching position at TU Vienna as a university lecturer, and then combined with some freelance work, and so this gave me basically a little bit of flexibility not to rush things, and I was very clear at that point that Zaha wouldn't be an option for me, because that was kind of almost like a unwritten law that if you did kind of okay at the studio, you could start working at her, or maybe UN Studio, or maybe Heatherwick. But I wasn't interested in that. So I really wanted to work for Big, or maybe Herzog Dömeron, that these were kind of these two things. But out of these were Big, definitely my favorite office. They were fresh. I mean, they are fresh. They were kind of young, and things were moving fast. So I really felt like this is kind of next generation excitement. And then I was since I was teaching and since I had my freelance jobs, I was just preparing my portfolio. I don't know, I went there once, kind of friend of a friend. She gave me a tour through. I kind of applied, I reapplied, and they said cool, but then it took another 2 months. And then eventually I got the job interview, which was also funny because I came from my whole portfolio was kind of Zaha stuff, parametric style and crazy renderings and very conceptual. And then I was presenting my diploma thesis and other stuff I did. And then it was kind of the last question, yeah, it looks all great, but we also saw that you were working with ArchiCAD, and could you show us like a construction detail? And it was like, okay, wait a second, it's somewhere. And then I had to close my portfolio. I had to go deep down in some old folders. And then I presented basically a construction detail as the last part of this job interview. And then they were actually looking for like a BIM, I wouldn't say specialist, like somebody who's good with BIM. And this is how I got actually in. So it wasn't with the fancy Zaha stuff. It was really like technical knowledge in a way.
Well, this shows how like luck plays a big role into these applications. And this is something that sometimes makes me question a lot of like the way that people evaluate architects, because it's not about only like your design. It's so complex. It's like if you think in an architecture process, the design part is like the little tiny bit in the beginning, which is done by a little tiny group of people, and then you give this initial idea to a bigger group of people that to have to figure out now how to make it buildable. So it's like I mean, I have a lot of respect for people who have worked, now I know, from all kind of offices. Like I've been a couple of weeks inside MVRDV, and it's awesome. In the end of the day, yes, they do like cool projects, but when you need to build it, it's not so different than, I don't know, the office I work at. I mean, it's pretty much the same.
These star offices, they basically, the later phases are always taken over by local offices anyways. No, but like, I think like a very important point to make is, that's what I'm always telling my students, like, don't take it personal if you apply. You know, like if a big office is they're looking at hundreds of portfolios, and then it's just a matter of what they're looking for. They seeing numbers and skills. They don't think poor Georgi or poor Martino, they have such a great portfolio, let's take him anyways. It's not about this at all. They have a free spot for a specific project which pays the bills, and then they need you. So that's I think that's something in the beginning you feel like kind of frustrated, maybe that I wasn't accepted in my office of my dreams, but so what? Just apply like 2 months later, maybe with a slightly updated portfolio, and it might work.
How, and when you moved there, when you ended up working there, can you share some of the projects you started working on, or you worked? So you went there 2017, 18, something like that?
17, yes, end of 16, yeah.
Okay, and you work on several projects. I'm curious, like, what was your experience there? The observations, the learnings. As I said, you have touched in somehow an experience with Zaha Hadid, and with a very prolific environment. How was big?
I mean, it was great. I have to say, I was quite fortunate, since I came not as an intern like most of the architects starting. They were doing like, most of them probably like a year of internship, so they know the office pretty well, and vice versa, and then they get a contract. For me, it was the rare case where I kind of joined right away as a architect, which made it also hard because obviously you know how it is, like it's your first real job and you have to get to know the office and the people and the project and so on and so forth. I was kind of fortunate due to this kind of BIM thing to get into Kistefos, which is this kind of twisting bridge / museum in Norway, which I think is one of the most beautiful projects Big has ever done. And the team was very cool. Some of them are still close friends. And I was there for quite some time. I think like all in all, maybe with some breaks and redesign phase, maybe for 1.5 years or so. And then in between, I was kind of working a bit on Panda House, a bit on Vestres Travel Center, a couple of international offices. So this kind of got mixed up then. And then in the last 1.5 years, more or less, it was also coincidence. I kind of got staffed after like a long summer break to Capita Spring, which is this tower in Singapore with a walkway in the middle between the 17th and 20th floor. And I got in quite late, actually, when where construction administration began. So I kind of started when they were digging the foundation, and I ended when the building was done. Then way later, when I was already back to Munich, and first I started as just a architect, a project architect, and then I took over project lead on one point, and it was very, very great learning curve, very cool project actually, to see really like all the design things kind of really start happening. I was fortunate enough to travel to Singapore quite often to see the construction site, to coordinate with the contractor, the client, local architects, also traveling to China and other places for material studies and tests and factory visits and stuff like this. So unexpectedly, this became the coolest thing in a way. I was before like, competition and stuff, and then of course it's exciting and very sketchy, designy. But then again, it's I think you learn everywhere. And then of course the office is also the office culture is very positive. And like there's a lot of parties. We went to Burning Man as a study trip, which was exciting.
Well, that's a great study trip. No, I think that a lot of the architecture students and younger architects look at these offices and maybe they, as you said, praise them more for their work in competitions, for the nice plans and the drawings that they see online. But once you get involved into architecture, for me personally, it's very beautiful to do the concept. It's very fun to figure out how the building is gonna look like. But also for me, it's super rewarding when you manage to finish the building, and then at some point you have to manage samples, and you go on the construction site and you see it taking shape, and then you see the little details that you have designed that now works. So I think that once you get a little bit more experience, you actually look more at the finished projects. And I think it's so nice when, for example, lately in the last couple of years, I did a lot of my holidays. I planned them as a study trip. I went to the Netherlands a couple of weeks ago. We visited so many projects from all the great Dutch architects. And when you see the finished building, it gives you a little bit of distance from these like nice flashy plans. And you understand that it's not so difficult actually, because you see it built and you say like, we think too into, I don't know, which software, which, parametric tool should you use? But in reality, you have to think about like, it's buildable, like how do I build it? So it's very interesting that you shared that.
For sure. I mean, the challenge is every phase is a challenge in itself. But of course, the biggest challenge is the moment it becomes reality. So you can have like 1,000 good ideas. If you never manage to kind of draw it into the real world, then it's just frustrating. And at the same time, if you manage to tackle all the challenges along the way, I think this is the most rewarding thing by far in probably in the whole world.
My favorite is that sometimes I go to visit these super, important buildings for us architects. For example, when I went to Copenhagen, I visit the 8 house, the VM houses, and like as an architect, you expect to see what is in the pictures that you've seen, but then you see like some people put I don't know, flowers on their balcony. Other people put like
How dare
a
they?
parasol or something. Nobody gives a shit about your beautiful images. Everybody is living in them, and it's like gives you a little. I like it. I like that experience because it makes you think different when you design the project. It makes you think about different things, not only these aesthetics that we have taught in school. And you mentioned this very cool stuff like this lifestyle, and I've heard from many people that work at Big that the culture it's very positive at the office. I mean, I don't know. Everybody, of course, can have a different experience because it's a big office. Maybe you land in the wrong team and then you don't have such a great experience. Have you managed to work like with some of the partners with Bjorke? Could you what for example learnings did you get from there? Because in my opinion, the most valuable experience that you get in these offices is to see how they work and how they think. So
yes, I guess one answer to that is that of course it's a big, in the end, corporate office which has a very, very professional stuff. So just to get thrown, I mean, there's so many things you will never take as something you learn, but then you realize it later if you're in a different context. Like, how is a setup of a team? How is the timeline of a project? Which kind of deliverables are to produce by whom? And all this kind of stuff. Actually, I think the more experience I have, the more interesting it gets. Is more almost like the business side of things. But also like the way of working, like small stuff, like to have team dinners after a deadline, or to sit together, to have kind of lunch together, to have drinks together. This is maybe one answer to that. And then I really have to say I was a kind of like a groupie before for Bjarke, and I still am. So I think it's amazing how this positive spirit he has really drags into now, I don't know, 700 people spirits. And of course, there's also reality. It's not like everything is a pink bubble, but I definitely would say that the overall atmosphere is very positive, very yes, it's more kind of thing. So this is really what I felt up until today. So if the intern has the best idea, it's going to be a crazy skyscraper with his scheme. So there is no hierarchy. It's more like the best idea wins, which I think is absolutely true.
I have one last question that it's gonna be probably a little bit come across maybe nosy, so you can decide as far as you want to answer this. But I know that a lot of people will say this. I'm playing the skeptical person here, right? All of this is great experience, great projects, great learnings. How was money? You don't have to say numbers. You can say I always say don't say numbers. Say, because I've heard from employees at Archistar companies that, you get a little bit like 10% or 15% less than what you would get in a traditional office just because you get to work there. But that's no bad feelings too big. It's just to explain also what is the cost of these decisions that people can make.
Yeah. One thing I can definitely say, I knew I was making more money than my colleagues at Zaha or clusters or so. So of course, Scandinavia is also expensive to live, but and then one beauty about Denmark, it's that your salary is protected by the architecture union. So there is some sort of limit, some sort of guideline or like a range where offices can pay you. So I could get along. It wasn't that bad.
Now we get to the more exciting part, because then at some point you left Big. How come you left? I mean, I guess it was not because you didn't like it anymore. What were the reasons to leaving it?
Yeah, it was a mixture of things. I have to say, like one thing was I kind of did my first side project on kind of after work, which was Tresuba, which I kind of worked like once in a while, and then this got finished. Then I was like 3 years at Big. I kind of made it to a level where I thought like, wow, I'm proud of myself. You know, I could kind of do this now for the rest of my life. And what's the end goal? And then I thought like, yeah, well, like one of my long-term dreams was always to try it on my own. And of course, the longer you stay at an office in general, but at Big, the more spoiled you get more responsibility, your team gets bigger, you get more salary, you maybe have to work less crazy hours. So everything becomes more convenient to make you stay longer. And then I was at the point where after 3 years, Singapore was kind of running out. And then I was kind of starting to get new kind of big competitions. And then it was like, before I kind of really get into that, maybe it's a good time to just try. And then I got like assistant position at TU Munich, which was great, and was an interesting research project on 3D printing with salt. So I kind of thought like, why not giving it a go now or never? And yeah, this made me leave. I remember on my goodbye speech, I think I started like, it was in the middle of a deadline, and I was kind of swamped. Like, I just have to quickly have my goodbye speech, and then like, wait a second, I'm leaving. That's my last day. And actually, I kind of continued the work. Even though I took my laptop. My wife now was driving the car, and I was working, having still my laptop open, working on my labs, trying to get to finish up this competition, which we were just doing. So it wasn't definitely a goodbye, but it was also more like I just need like a new context. And I mean, up until today, I'm still working with and for Big now as kind of external consultant in various projects. I finished up the Singapore project, which also due to COVID got like prolonged for another 2 years, I think, after I moved back to Munich. So it's that's kind of how it started.
And since you've moved back and started your own office, what kind of project have you managed to work on? And how you get them?
Yeah, I mean, maybe also worth to say, like, Munich is my hometown, but it also was a bit of a strategic decision, because in my mind, the city is wealthy but kind of conservative. So I thought I could maybe fill in like a small niche of more design focused, more kind of special architecture kind of niche, which I couldn't see so much happening here. So yeah, this kind of made me also kind of go back. And then this kind of almost answers your question. And then, I mean, so maybe also I was never, from day one, I was never in need of commissions or jobs, which is very fortunate. So I'm really thankful for that. So it was never the problem to get enough jobs. It's more the problem to find the right clients and to find somebody which kind of matches your own portfolio. I think this is the biggest learning curve I had to take in the past 3 years. Not to say just yes to everything as what you do in the beginning, like yeah, project, let's do it, or like even like I don't know, like standard architecture work, which is nice. You know, you learn from everything, nothing bad about it. But definitely, I'm also not the best in drawing. I don't know, technical details and stuff like this. Or how to renovate like an old farmer's house. It's a beautiful job, but it's maybe not my expertise. So this is kind of what I had to gradually learn to really focus more on design focused project, let's say.
When did you move back? What year? Before the pandemic or after?
Just before. Just before. It was end of 2019.
And so basically you're doing it like this. You have this, you're an assistant in the TU Munich or TU Vienna?
Yeah, I'm like in Vienna. That's the longest job I have. I think now in the 8th year is like, it's called university lecturer, where I teach like the design studio. And then in Munich, I was for 2.5 years university assistant, where I was researching. But then the job ended basically with the professor retiring. And then I was also at this point, I was feeling let's focus as much as possible on my own business.
But basically, you have these like lecture gigs that pay you the bills, and then in your spare time, you work on your own practice, or you have enough time to work on your practice, and it's when you manage to gather new projects and work on them, right?
It kind of shifted with the Munich project. It was kind of like that, but it was also 20 hours a week. So it took way more time than the job in Vienna. I just like still love Vienna, and I love teaching, and I just love coming back once in a while. So this is more like a, let's say, fun side hustle.
And what was your experience then with the scenery of clients in Munich? Because you mentioned, I don't think it's only Munich, I think it's Germany, that it's a little bit more conservative. But in defense of German clients and developers, I was attending this nice event in Frankfurt last week or 2 weeks ago now. There were people from Zaha Hadid, from UN Studio, from Sauerbruch and Hutton. And they mentioned that in Germany, there are 20,000 building regulation rules all over. And in the Netherlands, there are 9,000. So also the constraints are much more than, and I think sometimes it's ridiculous, because I think, come on, like Dutch people are not stupid. Their building are not falling down. Their people are not dying burned inside. Maybe we should like think it through. Like it's a little bit stupid to have this. And also my former boss, Holger Meyer, he was also on the podcast, and he said all these regulations makes building also too expensive. And in a situation like the one we are now, the crisis is getting bigger, because if it's so expensive, like even to build a cube, then why should you even try to build something different? So
yeah, they just actually released like a special building regulation, which is this kind of wild card. I'm not sure if you heard about this, because everybody knows it and feels it. And definitely that's something which just makes our built environment just worse.
But also it's this new class of building called Class E, which is supposed to be experimental class, but also it's kind of like stupid to have a wild card instead of just saying, okay, let's change some of these rules or eliminate the rules because also I probably then you end up having to negotiate with the authorities if you can qualify for this class, and it sounds a little bit the German solution to stay stiff.
I felt it like a quick fix rather than fighting against like how many did you say?
20,000.
20,000 regulations. The wild card might be the faster way.
I mean, I don't know. You've worked in other countries. Here in Germany, we have these DIN rules, and they're ridiculous. Like they're for literally every single thing that there is in your house. Like even if there is a little button on some lamp or something, there is a whole paper that is like 20 pages that explains everything that button should do.
So, I know. Yeah.
But how was it for you? Like, I mean, you managed to do some. I'm scrolling through your website, and there are super nice projects. You definitely can see that you have worked big. You definitely can see that you are a parametric design master.
No. I mean, first of all, I would say parametrism is like a great tool, but only when it's needed. No, it's all for the sake of the best space, of the best architecture. No, but like I was quite fortunate that I could work also with bigger offices together. Maybe not bigger in numbers, but bigger or like in staff, but way more established. And this, I would almost say probably 50% of my work I was doing in collaboration with more established offices. And this, of course, made the beginning especially way easier to build something or to get a building approval or to deal with very technical stuff. I basically had like somebody more experienced which could support me in these things.
With established German offices, you mean? Or
yes, local offices.
And you work on like more offices that are not offices, more projects that are under constructions, or it's also you do competitions. What is your strategy in that sense?
I mean, probably 80% of my work is not on the website and will probably never be. So I only put the stuff which I really think I love. So there's a lot of big projects which are way more, let's say, closer to reality than what it is on the website.
No, so I'm asking because like I know how hard it must be to lift up like a practice from zero. I mean, and also like, as you said, you want to do something that's more, more ambitious than what we see around us here in Germany. So that's why I'm curious, like, what is your approach?
I mean, you never start from zero. That's maybe something you have to keep in the back of your head from time to time. It's a good education. It's a good environment. It's not like an office which from your parents or stuff, but it's I feel quite privileged in a sense that just that I'm able to do what I do through university, through the connection with BIG, through the connection to other offices. I mean, one of them is the one I did my internship before I started with architecture school. So this is like a connection which is 15 years old or so. So that's one thing. And then I don't know, there is no strategy. You just go with the flow. You just go step by step and see what comes next.
Now, after so many years, don't you think Zaha Hadid should have also taught you guys how to sell the design and make millions of euros? I think that's something that nobody teaches at the university. Like everybody is like focused on designing this thing. And I was thinking about it today. Why nobody teaches you? Because selling architecture is something very hard. Because if you need to sell me this bottle, you're like, you want this bottle? Here is the bottle. And I sell it to you and you get a bottle. Like I can talk about the feature of this bottle a lot. Like, I don't know, you're annoyed that the glass bottle gets broken? Well, get a metal one. But how do you sell like a service that 99% of the people think they can do themselves? Like they go to IKEA and buy furniture and do their house with. So I don't know. I think this is a big lack in education to teach people like, okay, let's do architecture business class or something like that.
I agree. I think it's very hard to teach, but I also think at the same time, there's 100% sure a lot of kind of really easy steps you could follow. And of course, like I also had like, in the beginning, I did the mistake, what I learned at Big, you come up with like 100 options and stuff like this. That's too much for the client if you want to build like a house or something like that. So these were things that I just learning step by step, and I still do. So I don't know. Just I think maybe the biggest learning, or one thing I really learned the last 3 years was you just have to be ready and you have to be at the right spot at the right time. So I had clients where we had maybe like a pre-concept of something completely detached. And then like 1.5 years later, he was calling me for like a huge job. And if I would have said like just before, look, it's not going to work. I just start being employee somewhere again. I would have missed this chance. So I can just recommend everybody who wants to try to have your own office, just try to keep it alive as long as possible, and then try to push it and be ready whenever the chance your chances are coming. But having said this, of course, it's also you have to be able to get it going. And this was, for example, for me, the university job. Or keep your costs very low. That's also like a huge advice I could give. Like it's gonna explode anyways on one point.
Did you, when you started the office, did you have also some sort of like a runway where you said like, I mean, of course you had these incomes that you were having, but like some runway to say, okay, even if I wasn't making any money, I could stay for like 6 months, 7 months, 10 months without any job?
Yeah, I mean, luckily enough, I never had this situation. I had the university job. I had quite intensively also Big at this point. So it was more like I had too many jobs. And maybe also one thing I did from quite the beginning, I was trying to outsource as much as I could. In a sense, I probably like after the first 2-3 months, I already got like an intern or like a student helping me for the drawing work. Because this takes in architecturality so much time and energy. I felt like if I'm sitting here drawing like a site plan for 3 days, it doesn't bring me forward. So this is something I try to do very early on, of course, to do the thinking, to do the designing, to do the sketching, but then everything which is production, I was almost able to outsource from the beginning on, to really focus. I mean, there's so much stuff happening which is not architecture. I would almost say it kind of changes from time to time, but I would say 60% of my time is not architecture related. And then from the 40% which is left, the majority is more project management. And then the design part, as you said, is quite little. And then it's more coordinating your staff and coordinating the workflow and stuff like this.
Yeah, indeed. Because also when the design is done, then there is also all this work that it's just as we said before, like bringing it forward, designing all the things that are needed, the construction documentation. One thing that I also think is that we architects have this tendency to talk a lot to each other, but we don't get an education in communicating to actually other people who will be the clients. What is your opinion on that? Because a lot of other people from other industries like graphic designers or web designers, I have the feeling they talk more like to people, and we talk more to other architects.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And unfortunately, at the same time, I'm just like that. So I love talking like over like a bottle of wine about architecture and discussing, and I hate this idea of going to some, I don't know, fair, some exhibition and trying to, or playing golf or whatever you should do to get clients. Yeah, actually, I would love to get like a business partner, in a sense, like all this 80% what I'm doing, or the 60% which is not architecture related. It would be great to have more like like somebody with a business focus, or maybe like a HR, or like a kind of commercial focus, in a sense that I could do more architecture.
But I think that, for example, the strength of Björk Ingels, and the main reason for which I like him and I like the office he managed to build together with the whole team that's behind him. It's not himself alone. There are also all the business people that actually are the one that made it so successful, is that he managed to communicate architecture to other people that are not architects in a way that they care. Because I have the feeling that, for example, all the other architects that don't have good feelings for him, don't like that he broke this way of communicating to each other in this very somehow elevated way. As you said before, that when Zaha Hadid showed up at the office, everybody would start getting still, and the assistant run back and forth. And as you said, also in France, in Italy also, the architects have this super superiority feeling that, I don't know, they are something special. And this guy managed to communicate to people architecture and show them how cool it is, and make them care that, I don't know, if you build the water protection of Lower Manhattan in a certain way, it could be actually fun. If you make the rooftop of a building accessible, it could be fun. So don't you think that's also like a skill that some like architects should focus on, to like understand how to talk, as you said, on with a bottle of wine on dinner to other people, and explain them and excite them about architecture?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, Bjarke has Sheila for the business, and also there is Dörte Mandrup has, I think, as the second or just equally important person, also a business person. Henning Larsen, I think, is maybe I'm talking nonsense, but I think they were sold to Ramboll. So there is, like, I'm just saying that I think many successful offices, you see the name, you see the person, but there is a very smart business behind, or like a business system behind, PR, management, IT, and so on and so forth, and all that. Bjarke could have the best ideas and the best pitch. If you don't have all this, it's not gonna be a built building. So yeah, this is like a side which is maybe not so sexy, or less little people talking about it, but it's absolutely essential. And then you're right, like how to sell a product. And I think Bjarke just found a very smart way at a time where, like this very academia architecture, how to break it down and really sell it in a very simple way. What's the benefits for you as the client, as the customer, and not from this kind of elevated, what you said, way. But at the same time, everybody has to find his own way of presenting. I cannot, if I would, I mean, of course, I kind of inhaled it by now after 7 years with Big. But of course, now I'm also trying, let's say, for example, if I want to sell a product or a design in Munich, in Germany, I have to find a different way of talking, of presenting. The client expect me to not to be the funny Dane. They expect from me to be maybe more serious, more with a deep technical knowledge of things. They ask me how much is a square meter of drywall, and like these kind of things. I don't think you would you would have asked if you have kind of like a Bjarke approach. So I don't know. It's very hard to tell. I think it's something mainly you will figure out throughout your career, like how to deal with problems, what kind of attitude you have towards problems or maybe hard negotiations. I think this is very essential.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I didn't say that you have to copy the style, but like these are some things that nobody ever taught me, at least in my architecture education. And I think that it's also like, I don't know, it's a very weird profession we have because we identify a lot with it. Like I was reading this book actually. It's called Architect and Developer, which is by this American guy, and he's an architect who started doing a project development. And he explains in this book how we are very weird because sometimes we are accepting to work for less money in order to do a specific kind of project, which if you think about it, it's ridiculous to any other profession because if you're a lawyer, let's say, or maybe, I don't know, just an office employee at some public government branch, you don't care like what you put your stamp on or or where you type like things on. You just care about like your paycheck. And we have this very difficult job that it's not an art, it's not a technical job, it's a very mix of everything.
But of course, this is exactly what you described as kind of the beauty about it and maybe the drama about it, that it's just in between two different worlds. How much would a Jeff Koon worth? Like it could worth €5, which is worth the paint, or it could worth like 50 million euro. It's just a matter of somebody being interested in it.
Yeah.
So
we're like, I like to think about architects as, the chefs that cook at starred restaurants, because what is the value of the pasta you buy at the star restaurant? More or less the same as the one you buy at the supermarket. But the whole added value is from the skill of the chef to put the ingredients together in this way that makes you experience food in a different way. And we do the same. Like, I mean, you can hire... If you were to build your family home, you can basically figure it out yourself. It's not so complicated. But if you want to live in a certain way or have a certain added value, then you need somebody that has been educated on putting the ingredients together. And do you have any plans or visions for your own practice, or as you said, for now it's just going with the flow and see what opportunities opens, or are there some opportunities that are opening that you can mention or that you cannot mention yet?
No, there is actually a lot of stuff. Going with the flow is kind of true, but of course you have to have a focus. Maybe what I briefly said before, I really try now to kind of strengthen the stuff I know best, and maybe more reject things where I would say they're still beautiful, they're still nice to work, but it maybe distracts me from the main goal. So I mean, I would love to still keep the 3D printing and architecture going. This is stuff I'm researching. I would this sort of very design focused kind of interior design is something I love because you can just be more playful. It's more into detail than maybe like big scale architecture. Then up until product design, you see some lamps behind me. They're kind of first tests of 3D printed lamps, which were actually part of like an interior project we just opened, or like a bar project where we could really do from like literally everything from bespoke lighting to the light switch. Basically, was and this is I think something I really kind of love doing, the whole thing, and then experimenting, talking to companies, figuring out really how to build like a crazy design. So yeah, this is basically things I'm further exploring.
How does your typical day looks like?
I try to keep it to normal hours. So I would say starts at 9, then I have one staff kind of regularly, maybe 2, depends on the project. So we are quite a small team, and now we just tackle the work what needs to be done. So there is no and at the same time it really changes. Like the office is 3 years old, but every month I feel like there is new things happening. So
how much time can you manage every day to work like hands-on on projects, like as you said, actually doing design?
Yeah, I would probably. I mean, what I said earlier. So maybe it's 40%, maybe it's 20%. This is where I would say I really have time to actually like the best design ideas. If I wake up in the middle of the night and think, shit, this is something I should have done differently, and then I just kind of half sleepy walk to the table and sketch something out or draw something on my phone or just take a note. It's something like I think many people know this, or many architects. When you have something brewing in your head, it's not like you have a 9 to 5 thing. It's just like you just work on something, you digest it, you redo it, you massage it, you test it, and then something great comes out eventually.
I always say I feel it like a puzzle, that they give you like a thing to solve, and then you're working on it, and then sometimes you get tired, and then you leave it, and then your brain unconsciously keep working on it, and you think, yeah, let me try again, and then actually
a puzzle, maybe like a puzzle has in a way you can see that it's not finished, but like that's why there is so much architecture the way it is, because you can do it in one afternoon. I could draw you a master plan, which looks like a master plan, which you might think the puzzle is solved, and many offices are doing it. And then, like to really kind of, I would almost see it's more like layers coming on top of each other. And the more you have, the more refined it gets. And a puzzle would be too easy, I feel. You know what I mean? It's clear that it's not working, but it's absolutely not.
Well, it's more like a puzzle without a picture. Like you have just to figure out with pieces. I mean, yeah, it's. I think that actually no project has ever been finished completely, because every building I've been in, you can find some flaws, and you say like, like.
Yes, in that sense, you're right. I was thinking these sort of puzzles where you basically see the
No.
part.
More like a puzzle, like I don't know, something that you don't, a box that you don't know how to open, or like you try, and then you're like, no, it's not the solution. And then you try again, and then maybe you're closer, or maybe you solved one little part of it. So it's it's a very weird feeling to explain to anyone else, because also we feel attached to it. I mean, I guess that when you see the building in Singapore, work on so many little tiny details that probably most of the people don't see or don't notice that they were so important. But then when you go there, you know that, and you feel like connected to a building, to a place, which is very weird.
Yeah, of course, of course.
And I was thinking about asking you something, and then I forgot because we started talking about this. Sometimes it happens because we talk about so many topics and so many interesting things that I'm sometimes lost in my mind.
Maybe to fill the gap, there is I think Rem Koolhaas said this, like a successful building has many like say parents, and unsuccessful has no parents. No, I think it's very true. Like if people love a building, you can be the architect, you can be the electrician, or you can be somebody living there, and everybody feels attached to this building. And rather, if it didn't work out, I don't want to say bad design. I think it's a very true thought that nobody feels connected, nor the architect, nor the builder, nor people using or living in the space. And I think that's very true, actually.
Yeah, one thing that pisses me off so much by working at normal offices is that sometimes there are people that are just accepting, as you said, to not actually finish the puzzle, but they say they finished it. And I hate that because maybe I'm still young. Maybe when I have kids and stuff, maybe these things will change. But to me, it's like, come on, like if we spend 8 hours or 9 hours in this place, let's at least make something we're proud of instead of just, fulfilling the contract with our client. Like, come on, let's push it let's stay 10 minutes more or think 15 minutes more. And then.
But what if it's 15 hours or 15 days or 1.5 months, And then comes what you said before. Is it art or is it like a business? And would a lawyer work 15 minutes or 15 hours more for something? And I think that's sometimes I just don't care at all. I just want to get the absolutely best results to mainly make myself proud. And then, of course, everybody else.
Yeah, of course. I mean, in your case, if it's also your office, it's even more like you don't think that way. I think that if I was working on my own office, I would be like, whatever it takes, like 24/7. But I think that when you're employed, of course, I mean, I also think, okay, I will make it cool as much as possible in the time I'm paid for, because I mean, it depends what they give you as a reward, right? If they say, okay, in the end of the project, you can have some rights in saying that that was your project. Okay, let's work an hour extra every day. Or if they put some contracts based on bonuses, how successful the project will be, let's do it. But the thing is that sometimes in architecture, this passion that we have, it's used for profit of the companies. Or, I mean, and now it sounds bad, and I know that some companies themselves don't make that much extra money on the projects, but they have to improve this. And this is also another thing that for me it's very sensitive for architects, is that they're passionate and sometimes they're used by big offices, like not big, but bigger offices, Archistar offices, because they know that these people are very happy to do this even for free. I remember when I got my first job here in Germany, they hired me because they didn't have good Photoshop people. And I did their Photoshop, like elevation sections, all kind of floor plans. And I was thinking, I do this for free at university. I would do it for free, and they're even paying me. And I think that Yeah, as you said, this is the beauty of our profession, but it's also like sometimes sort of a curse that we see things in this way. But anyways, we could talk for hours, but I don't want to talking about long hours. I don't want to keep you away from home for too long. It's already almost 9 in the evening. Every podcast finishes with this last question that is common for everyone. We are very sensitive souls as architects, and sometimes this creative battery or this energy to solve the puzzle goes in the lower level of energy. Is there something that you like do to recharge? Like, I don't know, reading certain books, traveling, sports, music, something that for you it's inspiring?
Yeah, of course. Of course, there's always like everywhere. It's about finding a good balance. No, I mean, there's maybe two books I enjoyed reading recently. One is called, let's say, more architecture focus. It's called Creativity Inc. from Ed Catmull. Friend and former intern from Big gave it to me as a present. Actually, it's about the founder from Pixar, and he kind of tells the evolution of Pixar as a studio and being this crazy IT nerd, and then evolving to a big company. And more on a personal level, I quite enjoyed from Yuval Harari, Sapiens. And it's like amazing book. You could like highlight every like 30 things per page. It's basically like a very brief history of the humankind. That's also like how the title is. And how politics and money and these kind of things changes. And then, of course, maybe also to end with something beautiful. What I almost feel like I have to do every 6 months. We have a small studio in Italy without cell phone connection, without internet, without any screen, next to 100 small apple trees and a small river, and like. When you look like 12 hours every day on the screen, this is like the perfect breakout and pause place where I fully recharge and and get a break from reality.
Yeah, that's indeed something that we all should do, and like they find this little time in the year where we detach a little bit from all the screens and information. Well, Martino, thank you very much for being on the podcast. And I always like to say this was your first time, but it's not going to be for sure the last one. We're going to stay in touch. We're not too far away from each other. Maybe I should just hop on the train and do a studio tour. I film some vlogs so we can do the studio tour in Munich. And when there are some big news and some cool projects you want to talk about or any other topic, you're always welcome back.
Georgi, thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure talking to you. And definitely, see you soon.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.